When I first got into economic development, nearly a decade ago, I quickly became frustrated. Frustrated not because I was young and didn't know what I was doing. Frustrated not because I was doing economic development in the rural Midwest, surrounded by cornfields and little else to work with. Frustrated not because I had gotten into economic development at the height of the Great Recession, in a state which had just received the unfortunate ranking as being one of the least business-friendly in the country, where, by the way, I had to scrape ice off my car 3/4 of the year. If there's anyone here from Illinois, I'm sorry. I love you guys. Some of that should have just sounded familiar. Now, I wasn't frustrated for any of those reasons. You see, I had started out working at a business incubator in one community, and then had moved to doing economic development as my first real job in this new community. While I was still working in an incubator and helping entrepreneurs, I was now involved in economic development more broadly: business attraction, retention, talent, and workforce development. My frustration lied in the fact that internally I was passionate about helping entrepreneurs. That was the one area of economic development that I cared the most about. But the real focus and attention externally in this community and in the field of economic development seemed to be everything else. Many of the people in this old manufacturing town I was in still define success solely as the return of the factory jobs they once knew. Stories about new factories and large employers coming to town, when those things did happen, they were rare in that area, made the front page. Stories about small businesses and entrepreneurs, that stuff was buried, sometimes not even mentioned at all. No, it was clear that one thing mattered more than anything else, not just in this community, but in many places like it. Whether economic development was being talked about by professionals in the field, like all of you, media, politicians, whomever, the one metric that mattered most at the end of the day was always, the one word that mattered most was always. Can any of you guess? Jobs. It was crystal clear that no other metric, benchmark, or KPI mattered more than jobs. But my real problem and my real frustration lied in the fact that I didn't feel that helping entrepreneurs, what I was passionate about, what I felt made the most difference long term, could be fairly measured by a job count alone. While a few of the entrepreneurs I had helped had quickly scaled their employment, the majority of them remained small, growing their employment slowly over time. Some of them not at all. Increasingly, I found many were solopreneurs and freelancers who never intended to hire anyone, preferring instead to do all the work themselves, outsource work online, or to use contract workers. These lone entrepreneurs, though, were now becoming self-sufficient. Many of them able to quit their old jobs. They were creating wealth, which flowed over to their families and in their communities. But on paper, and in my monthly reports, that stuff didn't matter, because it wasn't jobs. More aggravating, I noticed that many politicians would talk a big game about the importance of supporting entrepreneurs, but it was mostly just lip service. Yeah, go over there and talk to the Small Business Development Center or SCORE about that. They'll help you out. It honestly broke my heart, and I'm not lying, it broke my heart to see that communities were pawning entrepreneurs off in an endless circle of, well, go talk to somebody else. Because at the end of the day, they didn't perceive their true value. Can I be just totally honest with you guys? Totally honest. I saw a few economic developers doing the same, preferring instead to only focus on the big jobs projects, which could put the big jobs numbers on the scoreboard and earn them the support they needed from their city or county for the next round of grant funding. If that's any of you, by the way, signify by not raising your hands. I'm just kidding. There's a guy in the back. I'm not sure if I put my hand up or take it down and put it up. No, I couldn't seem to figure out why jobs seem to matter so much. Then one day, in thinking about this, had my own realization. We've just gone through one of the biggest transitions of our economic model in history. A transition from an industrial economy into this thing we now call the new economy, or the knowledge economy. Factories and large employers were really the determining factors in figuring out how fast your town's economy grew in the past, and jobs was a perfect measure for that era. But now, globalization, automation, e-commerce, the rise of knowledge workers and the creative class, and this new ability to create individual, even self-sufficient enterprises or micro-entrepreneurship, all of these things are collectively defining this new economy that we find ourselves moving into. Let me give you a few examples. The taxi industry versus Uber. According to a US Census Bureau report from this past summer, the number of non-employer establishments in the taxi industry, in other words, that means independent Uber and Lyft drivers rather than taxi companies with employees, grew by 46%. My home state of Florida had the biggest growth of any state in the number of people providing ride-sharing services, a nearly 72% increase. But Uber is just the beginning. Industry disruption is happening all around us, eliminating what we once knew as traditional jobs. We're in a hotel. How will jobs in the hotel industry be affected by services like Airbnb? How will jobs in the restaurant industry be affected by kiosks like the ones we see popping up at McDonald's and meal delivery services like Bite Squad? How will retail continue to change with e-commerce? How will e-commerce warehouses change with automation, like those Amazon robots that we've all seen moving packages around? Stop and imagine with me for just a second that if this kind of industry disruption keeps happening, will the word jobs as we know it still have the same meaning that it does 10 years from now? And trying to base this new economy solely on jobs and do economic development and measure all of our outcomes still on that one word, well, putting it into millennial language, I think it sucks. I meet so many people in economic development who tell me that they're getting just tired and burned out all the time. Could part of the problem be that we're running ourselves into the ground, trying to succeed at achieving a somewhat outdated metric, trying to build only within the industrial economy mindset of the past, rather than the new economy paradigm of the present and the future? Our economy has changed, but we haven't changed the metrics. That's like switching from baseball to basketball and continuing to score the game based on home runs. It doesn't make any sense. And as long as we do it, I think it's going to just frustrate the heck out of all of us. About a year ago, I was invited to a Kauffman Foundation conference called the eShip Summit for people like myself focused on building entrepreneurial ecosystems, people trying to create entrepreneurship within their communities. Kauffman had just published a small little book of all the recent research called the eShip Playbook. And you can find a copy of that on Google if you Google eShip Playbook. It's a PDF. I highly recommend reading it. And they'd given a copy of this to each attendee. As I was flipping through it in the hotel lobby, I stumbled across one page with one sentence on it. That's all it had, one sentence right in the middle, that stopped me in my tracks. It said, "People are the new companies." People are the new companies. I thought, what the heck does that mean? Thought about it, read on, and realized it meant that in the new economy, individual entrepreneurs, increasingly, more than large employers, will become the drivers of economic growth. And I believe that as economic developers, our efforts can now have the biggest ROI, not when we focused the most on helping large companies, but when we focus more and more on helping those individual people called entrepreneurs. Now, I know at this point there's some of you in the audience who are saying, yeah, I've heard all this fluff about entrepreneurship before. That's nice and everything. But that is super tedious and time-consuming work for an economic developer. I'm not going to lie to you, it can be. But I believe that when economic developers realize their highest new role as connectors for the entrepreneurs in their community, that's where the real magic happens. I know because that's what I do. I spend about 80% of my day making one-to-one connections for the entrepreneurs in my town to the people and resources that they need. Just last week, I helped a local entrepreneur connect with a local company who wanted to contract with him for the development of a new app, resulting in a $10,000 contract for that entrepreneur. I don't tell you that to brag. I tell you that because I seriously believe that value lies in economic developers making connections for the entrepreneurs in their community. It's just not currently getting measured. And look, helping entrepreneurs is nothing new. I'm sure many of you were at this conference talking about things like economic gardening as far back as 20 years ago. But what I'm saying today is this, that entrepreneurship has gone from being just a tool in the toolbox of economic development to becoming more of the toolbox itself. Helping entrepreneurs is no longer just one way to grow your economy. I quickly believe it's becoming the way. But how do we measure it? If counting jobs is no longer the best approach anymore, what is? Well, many of the metrics that people use today to measure their entrepreneurial development efforts, I'll admit, including myself, are very input-based. Well, we counseled 100 entrepreneurs. 50 received capital eventually to start their business. We have a network of 25 mentors. We've done 10 workshops and trainings. Those things are all fantastic. But they don't tell us how the economy is growing like the word jobs used to in the industrial economy 50 years ago. Jobs was the ultimate result we were looking for in that old economy. And look, why does the new metric even matter? Let's back up to that. Why does a metric matter? I believe that metrics in economic development is the most important conversation we can have. That metrics in economic development is the most important conversation we can have. It's how we know what we're doing is working and when it isn't. It's how other people know what we're doing is working, so we can have their support as part of the process. Without a new and more effective set of metrics, I don't think that we can continue to do what we do. Today, I briefly want to talk to you about 3 new ways that we might think about measuring our local economy's entrepreneurial output, if you will, and then finish up with a very simple model that I put together that I think can help get us there. New metric possibility number 1. How many people are becoming entrepreneurs? In your town or city, how many people are self-employed, drawing most or all of their personal income as an entrepreneur or an independent contractor? How's this number changing over time? And how does that, as a percentage of your population, compare to other cities? New metric possibility number 2. How much income are entrepreneurs producing? What's been the percentage increase in the individual annual income of those who reported they were self-employed on their tax returns? This seems like the kind of aggregate data that we might be able to get on a community level, and maybe a new metric like this is the new economy equivalent to what we're currently measuring only with traditional wages as a whole. At a Kauffman Foundation Mayor's Conference this past summer, which I wasn't at, by the way, because I'm not a mayor, but you can find a video online, an economist named Julia Lane suggested in her keynote that we might begin to obtain this kind of aggregate entrepreneur income data, if you will, from private websites like Amazon, Etsy, PayPal, and Square in order to determine entrepreneurial activity in a region. How cool would that be to see localized, real-time dashboards of e-commerce activity in your community? Just an idea. And number 3, and this one, if I could pick any of the 3, this is my favorite. How strongly are entrepreneurs connecting? Entrepreneurs connect in networks, and the strength of those networks or ecosystems matters so much. More connectivity means easier and faster flow of capital, talent, technical expertise, all those ingredients that entrepreneurs need to be successful. How might we use existing social networks like Facebook and LinkedIn in order to determine how strongly entrepreneurs are connected in your community? How many degrees of separation are they apart? In other words, again, could we measure the growth of an entrepreneurial economy by looking at the increase in the number of those who are self-employed, the increase in income from self-employment, and the overall connectivity of our ecosystems? And even if we're successful in doing this, I think the hardest thing, after agreeing to some new metric to measure our work, whether it's one of these or something else, will be moving the conversation toward that new metric. Adoption of that word, whatever it ends up being, not only in our field and amongst us, but in media and in politics as well. The word jobs has become so ingrained in people's psyches, and that's a change that'll take time. And again, I don't claim that one of these that I just told you about is a new metric which will replace jobs. These are conversation starters. These are ones that people in the entrepreneurship space have been talking about for some time now. And look, the title of my talk is The Death of the Jobs Metric. And I want to clarify that I don't think jobs are going away completely anytime soon. There's always going to be companies that employ lots of people. That's always going to matter to our communities. But what I'm saying is that I think we seriously need to consider whether jobs is still the primary metric everybody keeps talking about, given the nature of this new economy. Before I go, I quickly want to give you a 5-step model, and I promise this will take less than a minute, that I created to build entrepreneurial ecosystems, which I've used myself in communities with a lot of success. I did a whole separate talk on this that you can find online, but the essence of it is this: seek, synergize, support, streamline, and share. Step 1, seek. Find entrepreneurs in your community, not just the ones in plain sight. Sometimes you have to go and shake them out of the bushes. Once you've found entrepreneurs, synergize. Help them to meet one another so they can help one another. Build a network, build an ecosystem. Step 3, support. Once you've found entrepreneurs, once you've brought them together, listen to them. Listen to them first, and then connect them to the people and resources that directly meet the needs that they're having. So many communities try to help entrepreneurs without first truly listening to their needs. 4, streamline. Constantly eliminate barriers and make starting a business as easy as it can be in your community. What barriers exist to entrepreneurship in your town or city? And how can you be the one to help entrepreneurs knock them down? And 5, share. Help entrepreneurs in your community to tell both their individual stories as well as their larger collective one. Doing so will lead not only to more entrepreneurship down the road, but to continued growth of your community in the new economy. So many of you have such cool things happening in your entrepreneurial space in your town or city, but that story's not getting told. You have to be the one to help get it out there. Seek, synergize, support, streamline, and share. That's how I believe we can be most effective as economic developers. That's how I believe a community's economy can grow in the most healthy way possible. The goal of my talk today was to convince you that we have to get beyond thinking only about jobs. And if I've done that, even a little, then I've done mine. Thank you all very much.